of 8th graduation ceremony. First, I take this privilege to introduce you to Honorable Dr. Naushad Forbes, sir. Honorable Dr. Naushad Forbes, born in 1960, is an engineer and a foremost businessman in India. He is the co-chairman of Forbes Marshall, India's leading steam engineering and control instrumentation company. He is the chairman of Atlanta Aspen Center and Center for Technology, Innovation and Economic Research. Under Dr. Naushad's leadership, Forbes Marshall's deep process knowledge helps their customers save energy, improve product quality, increase process efficiency, and run a clean and safe factory. Forbes Marshall has consistently ranked amongst India's great place to work. Dr. Naushad was an occasional lecturer and consulting professor at Stanford University from 1987 to 2004, where he developed courses on technology in newly industrializing countries. He received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees from Stanford University. Dr. Naushad serves as an independent director on the boards of several companies as well as on the boards of educational institutions. Dr. Naushad has long been an active member of CII, that is Confederation of Indian Industry, and was president of CII for 2016 and 17. We are very fortunate to have you here as the chief guest of this graduation ceremony. We have hunger of the mind which asks for knowledge of all around us, and the more we gain, the more is our desire. Inviting Honorable Dr. Naushad Forbes, sir, to boost the minds of enchanting graduates and students of RIT. Please, sir.
Minister Jayant Patil, dignitaries at this convocation, and members of the Governing Council, Director Dr. Sushma Kulkarni and members of the faculty, recent graduates, especially recent graduates, ladies and gentlemen. First, my warm congratulations to all the graduates. It is a pleasure and privilege for me to be with you today. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you, albeit virtually, at Rajaram Bapu Institute of Technology. We live in truly unprecedented times. Unprecedented is an overused word, but if there ever was a time in history when it applied, this is it. We are living through an unprecedented health crisis in terms of the number of countries affected and the proportion of the population affected in each country. As we all know, India was hit hard by the second wave of infection in April and May. We are staggering back to some degree of normalcy at this time, but there is continued uncertainty about future waves and how long all this will last. Unprecedented also in terms of economic crisis. A combination of lockdowns and infection have damaged the economy around the world and at home. So you are all graduating in truly unprecedented times, with simultaneous challenges of health and economy. I can imagine that you are concerned about the world's future, our country's future, and about your own individual future and its prospects. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented leadership. Can we collectively rise to the challenges we face? How can you, as newly minted engineering and management graduates, participate in this process? A convocation address is an opportunity to indulge oneself. Since you don't get to ask any questions, this is a fine opportunity for me to give advice with no consequences. I thought, therefore, that I'd make a few comments about your options in these unprecedented times. I'm mindful that most of you listening have just graduated, are parents of students, and are well-wishers of this institution. Having a degree from a good institution like RIT is a privilege. It means one automatically has opportunities that are distinct and attractive. So these reflections are for those like you who have the privilege of choice. Let's start with choosing the right career. How does one choose a career? I believe very strongly that one must enjoy what one does. This to me is an absolute. If you don't enjoy your work, change what you do. Too many of us choose fields of study and choose careers because someone tells us they are good to do. We must value English as much as engineering and history as much as medicine. The same applies to all professions, teaching or government service or banking or whatever. And if you work in industry, the quality of the company matters more than its fame. Any student of management, such as all of you MBAs out there, will be familiar with the theory of motivation. Just to remind you that factors split into motivation factors and hygiene factors. Money is a hygiene factor. If you don't have it, you will be dissatisfied. But if you do have it, you may still not be satisfied. Satisfaction requires motivation, and the most enduring motivation factor is the content of the job itself. To that, I would add the kind of people one works with on a daily basis. So one must work with good people whose company one enjoys, and the content of the job should be such that the work is challenging and one learns all the time. If those two are right, then that will provide its own reward. Second, to me, it is important to make a difference. If you are one of 500 professionals recruited each year into a company, the chances of making a difference are very limited. That, to me, is the single big advantage of manufacturing companies over IT companies. For the IT service business, people are the product. So recruiting more and more people is the way to grow. Even the largest manufacturing companies recruit dozens of professionals each year, not hundreds, and certainly not thousands. So the chance of standing out, of making a difference, are much greater. I'll return to this point on manufacturing later on. It also matters where one works. Until some years ago, I used to teach a course each year at Stanford University. I loved the course, the university, and the teaching. People used to ask me which I enjoyed more, teaching at Stanford or working in Pune. My answer was always that while I enjoyed the teaching very much, I knew that regardless of how much people liked my course, it made very little difference to the university. Stanford was a great university before I got there, and if it had never heard of me, would still be a great university. I felt, though, that working in India, I made more of a difference in our company, in industry in general, in society around me. Perhaps that was just my ego speaking, but I felt and I feel that I make a difference here, and that makes it all worthwhile. I'd like to tell you a quick story next, and then I'll talk about your potential role as a newly minted graduate as a leader, so we have the right future as a country. My story is about someone who works as a security guard at our factory. He said to us a few years ago with great pride that his son had graduated as an engineer and gone to work for GE, and his daughter had qualified as a doctor and started work in a hospital. So within a year, this family had gone from a monthly income of around 15,000 rupees to a family income of 1.5 lakh. That order of magnitude improvement in well-being is what has been driving our growth forward as a country. As you may know, consumption contributes 60% of our GDP growth. This growth is real, it is widespread, and it has 30 years still to run. That's where our future lies. Now, note two things from this story. First, this security guard is not unique. There are hundreds of thousands like him. But he is also not typical. There are many, many millions of Indians who aspire to go through the same process. This, to me, is our development challenge. How do we create opportunity for all 1.4 billion of our population? Note also the crucial role of education. It was the ladder of progress for our security guards family. So I hope you appreciate that your education is a path to a better livelihood and that your education is the platform for great citizenship. Let me come back to my argument of working in India. When I graduated from college in 1987, a long time back, we lived in an India that was stuck. My favorite weekly newspaper, The Economist, did a survey of the Indian economy in June 1991, in which it said, nowhere in the world is the gap between what might have been achieved and what has been achieved as great as it is in India. That is a very sobering statement. Isn't it great that in these 30 years, so much has changed that today no one could make that same statement? So as we deal with our unprecedented health and economic challenge, I think it is good to remind ourselves that in the last 30 years, India has been one of the world's 10 best performing economies. Our collective task is to ensure that we will also be one of the world's 10 best performing economies in the next 30 years. We cannot take this for granted. Achieving this must be our minimum ask for any government we have and for ourselves. But I will go further. Our task is to ensure not only that we are one of the world's 10 best performing economies, but that we are the world's best performing large economy in the next 30 years. That must be our goal in spite of the havoc caused by the virus. Now, how can we be the world's best performing economy in the next 30 years? We have progressed substantially since 1991, but we are still in the poorest one-third countries of the world. We should not forget that fact. Let's compare ourselves with our aggressive northern neighbor. In 1980, both China and India had roughly the same wealth. Today, China is 5 times richer than we are. How? In the last 40 years, we have grown 5 to 6% a year, the best performance in our history. But China has grown 9% a year for these 40 years. And that difference of 3-4% in growth has made them today 5 times richer than we are. We must do the same. If we grow 9% each year, it will take us 20 years to be as rich in 20 years as China is today. That surely must be our minimum aspiration, to be as rich as China is today in 20 years' time. So we have to grow at 9% a year. Let me continue with an assertion. The strength of the Indian economy rests in private individuals and in our private sector. A comparison with China is always instructive. Whenever I have visited China, I have been struck by the role of the government there. It truly leads the economy, investing in infrastructure in a massive way, identifying new sectors for its public and private sector to invest in, building institutions for education and research. I've also been struck on visits to China how everyone says the same thing. Whether you speak to someone in the government in Beijing, an academic or a businessman, you hear the same thing, the same priorities, the same challenges, the same tasks underway. This may all sound very positive to you, but as an Indian, I find it very unnerving. Far from a scenario where someone from the government and someone from the private sector says the same thing, I am used to the difficulty of finishing any sentence that begins with the words, Indian industrialists believe that. It is this diversity of opinion that makes Indian industrialists resilient, entrepreneurial, and independent. And just as I am uncomfortable with the conformity of China, I am much more comfortable with our diversity in India, a diversity of communities, religions, languages, ethnicities, opinions, and arguments that makes us easily the world's most diverse country. In no other country does such diversity exist. We are a vibrant and noisy democracy. I disagree with anyone who tries to make us conform to a narrower definition of what it means to be Indian. Our diversity is a huge strength, but we should not take it for granted. It must be protected, nurtured, and used. We can use our diversity to lead the world in economic progress and in cultural achievement, and in building the kind of society where people from all corners of the earth will want to live. Whose responsibility is it to provide this leadership so all this can happen? In an authoritarian country like China, it is the government and the leader of that government that everyone looks to. But in our noisy democracy, leadership is much more diffuse. There is need everywhere for people to lead. In the union government, in the state governments, in private society, in industry, in NGOs, in each individual's operations and work and life. So this all creates space for those like you newly minted graduates to lead. What should you do? Let's return to our unprecedented challenges of health and economics. And I'd like to give you one example for both challenges of the great need for us all, for you to contribute leadership. Let's start with our immediate challenge, which is health. Unless we control the virus, we are going to struggle to get our economy and country back on track. This year, growth will be fine. But what happens next year and the next 20 years? We have to get to 9% year on year on year, not just this one year. We have to do it for 20, 30 years. Our health outcome will determine our economic outcome. So by tackling our health challenge, we can also tackle our immediate economic challenge. We need to have adequate health infrastructure in place to handle any new wave, so we do not experience again the trauma we saw in April and May. We also need to sustain COVID-appropriate behavior like wearing masks at all times in public and ensuring no large gatherings for whatever reason, no gatherings for social or religious or political or business purposes. And we're all going to be challenged in this next month during the festive season as we see gatherings around us. And we have to encourage people to wear masks and follow this behavior for a few more months to get things truly in control. Until we have fully vaccinated our entire population, that's our key task. As you know, the government committed that every adult Indian will be vaccinated by December. After some fumbling around for the first few months, we have begun to make excellent progress in our vaccination program, administering 140 million doses in July, 170 million in August, and 250 million in September. Today, 30% of our adult population is fully vaccinated, and another 30% have one shot. We need to keep this momentum of 250 million shots a month going to complete the process as soon as possible. Vaccine supply has dramatically increased in recent months, thanks almost entirely to Serum Institute, that is today producing over 200 million vaccines a month. And we as citizens and companies need to do whatever it takes to help the government get this done. One of the most troubling aspects of our COVID-induced economic trouble has been the fall in the employment ratio in the country. The Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy estimates that we have roughly 10 million fewer people employed than we had in February 2020. A further 10 million people have lost their jobs in cities and moved back to their villages. This needs to be reversed, and our cities need to return to being big generators of employment. One of our biggest employers is the tourism and hospitality sector, and this sector has been hammered by the pandemic, as it has in every country. As we get our health outcomes under control and limit the impact of the virus on our lives, the biggest bounce back will be in the tourism industry, and with it will come a recovery in employment. We also have great potential in manufacturing. China's growth has been driven by manufacturing. If China's economy is 5 times our size, its manufacturing sector is 8 times our size. We have much to do here. One of our biggest opportunities is our abundance of engineering and management talent, which this convocation ceremony represents. I understand over 600 BTechs, over 100 MTechs, and over 100 MBAs are graduating from RIT today. India sees over 1 million engineering graduates each year. This is a huge talent pool. It is the source of our IT industry's great strength. It needs to also be the source of our manufacturing industry's success. This requires that Indian industry invest much more in R&D. Indian industry today invests 0.3% of GDP in in-house R&D versus 1.5% in the world and in China. So we need to expand our investment in in-house R&D by a factor of 5. I hope the very best of you graduating today seek careers in R&D and manufacturing companies. We need you to help us build proprietary technology that we can then take around the world. I can go on, but it is time to end. As young graduates, you are ideally placed to provide the leadership to meet these challenges, addressing our immediate health crisis by helping the vaccination program move along such that we vaccinate everyone in the country, and by placing employment generation and the promotion of employment generating things like tourism and manufacturing at the center of our growth story, so that we include all 1.4 billion of our people in our progress. All this is a huge challenge, but it is precisely this point that there is so much to do, so much need everywhere, so much opportunity to contribute at work and in our community that makes for purpose in life. My congratulations again to all the graduates. I wish you a life of freedom where your diversity has full run, of doing what you love, and of being the leaders who make a difference.